I'm going to show how to make this water effect using Affinity's procedural texture filter. This effect is based on a video by SimViz official who used this idea to make a water effect for Blender. Now the idea was that if you think about it, the Voronoi pattern looks a little bit like waves. So for this effect I'm combining the Voronoi texture with a Perlin noise texture and then just stacking several layers of those. Another thing I do in this video is I show a new way to mix colors together, which is a much more common way of doing it in shaders than I have been doing it. We'll start with a new document. I'll choose Legacy PC and set it to 1024 by 1024 pixels. Make sure it's in RGB mode and create that document. I'll fill it with black and add a live procedural texture filter. I'll add a single equation and assign it to the 3 color channels. I'll add a real number input A, label that scale, and set that equal to 4. I'll start with a coordinate system, var v equals vec2, a 2-element vector for the x and y coordinates, and I'll use rx and ry. So relative x and relative y allows me to move the pattern around, and then times a, my scaling factor, and dividing by h, which is the height of the document in pixels. I'm also going to want to stretch this out a little bit, and so I'm going to add a stretching factor. So I'm going to multiply this by a vec2, 2-element vector that consists of sx and 1. So I want to stretch it in the x direction. And so to do that, I will add a 0 to 1 slider. I'll give that the name sx, and I'll call it stretch. And set that down to about 0.5. So it's just going to stretch it out in the x direction. Then I'm going to do my Cellnoise. So this is a variable t1 because I'm going to be blending this with the Perlin noise later. But for now I'll set it up. Cellnoise and v.x, v.y, and c. I'll put in a parameter for the Cellnoise c, which will be a real number input, and this will be the Cellnoise. I'll just label it cn rand for the amount of randomness of the Cellnoise. I'll just leave that at 1 for now. I want to see more of these, so I'll set my scale up to 10, I think. Oops. 10 to get started. So it doesn't look particularly wavy at this point, but one of the things I want to do is to make these sort of rounded edges, make the edges more rounded so they're not just straight lines. In order to do that, I'm going to add turbulence to this. So I'll add a turbulence multiplier and then a turbulence scale. And so I'll label this one TR, this one TS, and this one is this is the amount of the turbulence. And this is the turb scale. And I think if this one's 2, this is down pretty low. And then I need to add that to my Cellnoise. So to make turbulence, I'm going to add on TR times my U directional noise, but the unit directional noise, and I want it to be the SC, the S-curve type of unit directional noise. And then I'll have TS times V. And then that is returning a vector, so I want to take the x component of that, so I'll put a dot x after that. That'll return the x component of that, and that was a lot to type in, so I'm just going to copy this whole thing, the Control C, and then Control V it over here and change that to a Y, and now I have my noise, and so it's starting to look a little bit wavy. and I can turn the turbulence on just a little, like that. So these are going to be waves. Now one of the things that I can do, and this is actually the same as the curves adjustment, is this interpolant. So I was wondering, what do I use this interpolant for? This actually has the same effect as the curves adjustment. It starts out low, goes up, and then flattens out again. So if I apply that to actually a color image, it'll look a lot like the curves adjustment. But I'm going to just apply it to my texture here. So if I do scint on this whole thing, it'll look like that, and it emphasizes the top part of this and sort of rounds off the valleys a little bit. So that's my first texture. The second texture is going to be Perlin noise, and so I will do another variable for that one. This will be texture 2, T2, and that is perlincubic, and V times, I'm going to have a second scaling factor for this one, A2, and then I'll use 10 octaves, and I'll have a smoothing factor S for that, just like that. And so I have to add a real number input, A2, and a 0 to 1 slider for S. And so this is going to be my Perlin scale, and this will be the Perlin smooth. I'll bring that down, and so this I'm going to add on to the other one. I'm going to blend these two together. And this will be sort of a little roughness on the top of the waves. Now I'm going to mix the two textures together, so I'm going to create a final texture variable, TF, which is equal to the mix of T1 and T2. And the mixing factor I'm going to put in as I so that I can adjust this. And so I'll add a 0 to 1 range input. I'll label that I, and this will be the mix of the Perlin noise and the Cellnoise. So if I bring this down, it's pure Cellnoise, and then as I bring it up I get more of the Perlin noise. And if I bring up my Perlin scale, I can add, it'll look like just a little bit of, you know, turbulence or foam on the water, little rougher waves on top of the basic waves. So that's the idea with that. Now I'm going to use a new method for blending the colors. So usually I do I take the first color times the texture, and then I take the second color times 1 minus the texture, and that's how I blend them together. But I'm going to use the mix function, which is linear interpolation, so it's the same as the lerp function, and I'll use that to mix the two colors together with the texture as the interpolant, which for me that was sort of tricky to get my head around using that. But in shader programming, that's the way they do it all the time. They're using these mix and lerps functions. They just use them all the time for everything they can. So that's what I'm going to do, and it turns out that's a little more flexible than doing it the way I was doing it. I'm going to want to have a scaling factor and an offset in here, and I'm going to put those in next. And then I'll add my colors at the end. So I want a mix and an offset. So I'll use a 0 to 1 for the mix, which will be I1, and an minus 1 to 1 for the offset, so I can go positive or negative OF. And this one I'm just going to call the fader, and this one is going to be the offset. Alright, now I'm going to add 6 color inputs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll label these. Okay, I've got all my inputs set up, and so now I'm going to put in the code. So I'm going to have a mix of vec3 of R2 G2, B2. So I'm going to put this one in first because this is the lower value, the bottom of my pattern, and I like to think of that as the second part. So anyway, and then the next part is this is a vector, and then I have another vec3, which is R1, G1, B1. And then I need to cast my texture as a vec3 because all three parts of a mix have to be the same size vector. So if you have, they don't have to be a vector, but if you have one of them a vector, they all have to be vectors and they have to be the same size vector. So I'm going to cast this as a vec3, and I can just put TF in there. I don't have to repeat that 3 times. It'll automatically assign the TF to the 3 parts of the vector. All right. So that's the first part. And if I adjust these a little bit, you can see that it's starting to come in. It's actually starting to look a little watery already, okay? And I'm going to add a multiply by my I1, the fader, and add the OF, the offset. So that's that, and so I can adjust the offset to make it darker or lighter, and then this is the fader to sort of smooth it out a little bit. Now I'm going to have 3 layers of this, and the first layer is going to be sort of the middle layer, and then I'll have a bottom layer and then a top layer on top of it. So the first layer, I want it to be pretty smooth. So not too much turbulence. I'll have a certain amount of turbulence because I want it to be curvy. I want it to be pretty curvy. But mostly just the Cellnoise and not too much of the Perlin noise. And not really too much of the fader, so I don't want too much variation. And I want it to be sort of a blue-green color. Just a little bit of a blue-green down here. So for this middle layer, I want it to be mostly sort of a little bit flatter. All right, so that's good. And then I'm going to right-click here and duplicate this, and just drag that over. And let's see, so this is set to screen right now. So I'm going to turn that one off. And this one, I'm going to change it to normal. And this will be the bottom of the water, either the bottom of the ocean or the bottom of the lake or river, depending on what you're thinking of it. And so this one I'm going to invert the colors. So I'm going to have the second color light and the first color dark. So if I do that, it'll look sort of like bumps instead of waves, which is what I want for the bottom of the water. And for mine, I'm going to make it sort of an orangey color. You can do whatever you want for these, really. Water can take on a whole variety of different colors. And this one I want to be fairly dark, and so I'm going to use my offset to bring it down a little bit. But I do want it to be somewhat green on the bottom, so I'm going to turn the red down. And so it's just sort of murky bottom of the ocean. I'm going to make this, turn the stretch off a little bit, and then maybe make it a little bit bigger. So you'll be seeing through the other layer to see this layer. So now I'm going to turn back on the other layer. So there you have sort of the water, and then you can see, oh, there's something underneath there. It's sort of hard to tell what it is, but that's the bottom of the water. That's what it's supposed to be. All right, and now for the top layer, I'm going to duplicate this one more time, this middle one, and it's set to screen right now, but I'm going to change, let's see, I want to change this top one to, I think, soft light. we'll do soft light because then I can still see some of the stuff underneath. Yeah, and then I'll just set this up. For this one, I'm going to change the scale up to 20. This is going to be, you know, the top level, and this one is going to be sort of wavy. So I'm going to add in, increase the Perlin smooth, move the mix over. Oh, not that much. And then I want these colors to be almost white, I think. And this can still be blue. And then the fader I want to be pretty high. Alright, and then for the last part, I'm going to add Phong lighting on top of this whole thing. So I'm just going to copy that from a previous video and put that on top of the whole thing. And that one has soft light as well. So this one is, the mixed mode is normal, the next one is screen, and then the top one is soft light. Well, I'm going to leave it like that, and I'll let you mess around with it, see if you can get a better looking effect. It isn't exactly like water, but it is sort of a nice effect, and it has sort of a watery effect to it. You can tweak the colors, make it a little more blue-green or a little bit different if you want to. For instance, you could make it darker, watery like that. If I bring down the offset just a little, it changes it quite a bit to a darker color here. Alright, well, I think you'll probably be able to come up with some cool stuff with this effect, and I hope you like it. Let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.